Hello and welcome to the September 10th edition of the weekly OKPreps Extra Show. I'm Patrick Prince, joined by high school and college sports editor Barry Lewis, and we're here for our little weekly chat on high school athletics. So, Barry, let's start with 6A1 and Owasso. We're just a couple of weeks into the season, and already you have your third number one atop the state's largest class. So, Barry, with Owasso having two very impressive wins over Bixby and Jenks, what questions have they answered that maybe you had for them going into the season?
The biggest is the quarterback question. No one knew what Drew-Frankenfield could do because no one had seen him here. No, he had not played in a varsity game. So there was a lot of questions, as you would have in any situation when you've got a sophomore quarterback coming in who hasn't played varsity football previously. How's he going to do? Because we saw even last year with Knox Dyson, as great a season as he had a bad first game last year. And so Drew was a big question mark coming in the year. Question answered. he has been all you'd want to be from a quarterback. But to the rest of the team's credit, if you're going to have a sophomore come in, he is coming into a pretty ideal situation because he does benefit from a strong running game and a strong offensive line with Riker Half and Cherry. They are probably Half and Cherry are probably the best two offensive lineman combination, although Jenks would argue they've got some great linemen too, but Owasso probably has the best offensive line in the state. It certainly has looked like it so far this year. So great running game, great offensive line. So Drew Frankenfield does not have to throw 30 times a game. And I
Yeah,
think that's important now. He certainly could throw 30 times a game. He's been very effective throwing the ball, but I think that really takes a lot of pressure off your sophomore quarterback. He's only having to throw 16 to 18 times a game, and he's doing it very efficiently.
yeah. Watching the Jenks game, Barry, he just, and I'm not even talking athletically necessarily. He just doesn't look like a sophomore. The just just his mannerisms and his demeanor and his command of what's going on. Like, is that fair? Is that some of the things you're seeing?
Absolutely. And of course, the great ones don't look when they're sophomores, usually don't look like they're sophomores. Remember shaker-reisig. He did not look like a sophomore when he was a sophomore. Of course, most sophomores have not already won a state championship as a starting quarterback. Carson Kirby from Bixby, the same way last year. He didn't look like a sophomore. You just go on and on when you look back at some great quarterbacks through the years. So he's got that something special about him. And you figure he can only get better from now. Another question from Owasso. I know it seemed like they may have had some concerns about their defense coming into the year. I mean, for me, looking from the outside, I thought they looked in pretty good shape defensively. And certainly the defense has played up to a really strong level so far when they've held pretty well contained Bixby and Jenks, especially in the second halves of those games. So that's been the defense is playing well. The offense is hitting on all cylinders. It's a really great combination from Owasso because coming into the year, Owasso was the only one of the big four teams. I don't want to exclude Broken Arrow, but of the big top four teams that we had ranked that we thought could win a state title, the other three being Jenks-Union, and Bixby, they all had a proven starting quarterback, veteran starting quarterback. So there's no questions at the quarterback position. Owasso was the only one where there was a question mark, a newcomer at quarterback. Question answered, and strong quarterback play was the only thing I thought that or the lack of strong quarterback play was the only thing I thought might keep Owasso from being right with those other three teams. Well, we know they've got a strong quarterback, and so they've got a great shot at winning a state title, as good a shot as those others. Obviously, the fact that Owasso is the third number one team in 3 weeks in Class 6A1. So right now they're number one, and I predict that they'll hang on to the number one position at least for a couple weeks as they are visiting Sand Springs this week. Let's talk about a tough schedule, Patrick. Sand Springs, the Sandites, they opened the season. Their first two opponents have been the top two teams, and Sandites are a 6A2 team. Their top first two opponents are the top two teams in 6A1. What a way for Coach Bobby Klink's season to start. And of course, you look at Owasso, look at their first two opponents, the teams that were ranked number one at the time, Bixby and Jenks. So those two teams, what a blockbuster way to start the year. So Sand Springs, things probably, they'll probably have to wait a week for their first win. So, but it'll be interesting this week to see how Owasso, after two blockbuster games, there might be a tendency to let down. How will they approach the Sand Springs game? Will they keep their foot on the gas? Will they keep rolling? Or will there be any type of letdown? I mean, they could let down and still win fairly easily, but it'll be interesting to see how they respond. See, that was what was encouraging last week. After a huge, huge win over Bixby, they come out, no letdown at all against Jenks.
Yeah, I was going to say that, Barry. I'm glad you pointed that out. That the Jenks-Owasso game wasn't that close, really, and I thought you might see a little bit of a letdown after a big win. They're at Jenks. Jenks was hyped up, ready to go. So credit to Coach Antonio Graham and his staff for getting his team ready, and they looked. There was no letdown in that game, obviously. All right, moving on, Barry. So I'm interested in the Stillwater Union. I mean, that's an upset, right? I mean, it was a dramatic game. Union almost pulled it out, but Union losing to a 6A2 team, a good 6A2 team, but a little less in the classification nonetheless. Your thoughts on that?
I don't think anyone saw that upset coming, at least on the Tulsa World Picks panel. I think we all had a Union sweep. I thought Union would win by 2 or 3 touchdowns. I didn't expect for them to be in a 21-0 hole to start off the game. That's for sure. Granted, when you look back, and even coming into the game, it was a bit of a concern. Obviously, we talked about this on the show last week. When you have your top receiver, the shooting in which thankfully Jarek Wadey is recovering from out of the hospital. And, but when you have the emotional situation that involves. And then you're also losing arguably your top receiver. That's a tough 1-2 situation to face going into Stillwater. That being said, Union has other receivers, but still that is a major loss. Just besides the emotional impact it had on the team. So you've had that emotional roller coaster of a week. You lose a top receiver, and you're going into a Stillwater team who's going to be fired up. This is a big chance to prove that they can play with the best. And I never envisioned, though, that Union would be down 21-0 at halftime. And to Union's credit, wow, the fourth quarter, what a frenzied, huge comeback, impressive comeback. It's sort of like all of a sudden they flipped the switch and just came storming back. And it was almost like the game at Bentonville the previous week. They tie it in the last seconds of regulation, only this time their defense can't come up with the stop in overtime, and they lose to Stillwater. So I think got to give Stillwater a lot of credit. Mason-Schubert, their quarterback, was in his first start. Well, yes, it looks like he can make the transition from Morrison to Stillwater very well. Thank you. And although I think it really helps someone in his situation, just like we're talking about Drew-Frankenfield, even though Mason has more experience, not necessarily at the large school level, but he wasn't having to throw the ball all over the place. He didn't throw a lot. When he threw, he was effective, but they're not counting on him to throw 30 times a game. But still, to have Union lose to a 6A2 team, even though a good 6A2 team, real good 6A2 team, that's pretty stunning.
Yeah. Which brings us to Jenks-Union this week. That game is at Union, right, Barry?
Yes, it is.
And I guess if you want to look at what happened last year, this game comes down to turnovers more than likely. Yes?
Yes. As I wrote about in my top games column in today's Tulsa World, pick it up or look it up online. OKPrepsExtra.com. But shaker-reisig does not commit many turnovers. He was really good at avoiding turnovers. Although he did throw a pick six against Stillwater last week. But he's really good at avoiding turnovers, except when he played Jenks in 2 games last year. Committed 5 turnovers, 4 interceptions and a fumble, very unshaker-like. So if he does not commit those turnovers, Union would win those games, because the 3 turnovers last year he committed was after Union took a 21-0 lead, was in total control of the game. And then his turnovers got Jenks back in the game. Jenks took advantage, cashed him in, then it was game on. Last year, Jenks in the backyard bowl, that Union got into a hole. Jenks jumped off to a 24-0 lead, as I recall, because of turnovers. One of them was a great defensive play. You have to give Jenks player credit for coming up with a great interception, but then there was just another bad interception that Shaker threw. So that is the key in 2022 when Union routed Jenks at Union Tuttle Stadium. Shaker didn't commit a turnover, and Union easily won. So I think that is the huge factor, is can Union avoid turnovers?
Barry, the Jenks offense just looked out of sorts against Owasso. What do they need to do to change that this week?
I think it will help that they will have had a full week knowing that they're arguably their best receiver. Well, he's ranked number 1 in our all-world ranking, so we'll call him their best receiver, Caleb Barnett. They know he's going to be able to play in the game. So he'll be a part of the game plan. They'll prepare for Union knowing that he will be available to play. Last week, I think they were sort of stunned that all of a sudden on Friday, he becomes available to play just hours before game time. And although he played, that's not the same as preparing for them knowing that he can play. So you're trying to, all of a sudden at the last minute, trying to take advantage of having him available and trying to get him involved. But I think that threw some things off for Jenks. And of course, that won't be the problem this week. They know he can play. And I think you'll see a different Jenks offense this week against Union.
Barry, if you consider everything you've seen so far this season, it's still very early. But what stood out to you so far? Just if you were just to pick a team, a player, a moment.
Well, it's that man, the Owasso quarterback, Drew-Frankenfield. I mean, wow. He's got me seriously considering putting him into our all-world top 10 rankings that appear in every Thursday's Tulsa World. I'm not going to say I'm going to, because the all-world rankings of the areas, a reminder, it's a ranking of the area's top 10 players overall. And the criteria are projected performance this season, college potential, and past performance. And so obviously with just 2 games under his belt, he's lacking at this point, not to his fault, but don't really have much to go with him, although the 2 games he has played have been really good. So that's the only area where he falls short in compared to the 10 who are in there right now. But it's really rare for a first-year player, first-year sophomore, basically, to get into the all-world top 10 during the season. But he's certainly making a run for it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. What's a good sleeper game this week, Barry? We talk a lot about the larger classes, and there are some good games this week. Give me a sleeper game.
Everyone's paying attention, of course, to the Mid-First Bank Backyard Bowl. And rightfully so. It is the biggest rival game in the state of Oklahoma. But other good games to watch that are sort of getting overshadowed would be Shiloh Christian at Lincoln Christian. That's just a power pack game. And with this year, I mean, the most intense half of regular season football I saw last year may have been the second half of the Lincoln Shiloh game. It was a real knockdown, drag out war where defenses totally dominated, and Lincoln wound up beating Shiloh for the first time ever. But you've got the added storyline this year of Hudson Ball an all-world Defensive Player of the Year finalist from last year with Jenks. He's coming back to Tulsa, the Tulsa area, with his Shiloh Christian teammates. And so that's going to be a big addition for Shiloh. Both teams are 2-0. Both teams are perennial powers. That's a great game. And so but you might say that's sort of obvious that that would be a great game. What's an under the radar type of great game? Might be Cash at Metro Christian. Even that is the number 3 game on my list. Again, 2 perennial powers, but what's interesting is they hardly play in the regular season ever. They haven't played in the regular season since 2005. They played a few times in the playoffs. So that's going to be a really intriguing game. You've got 2 really good quarterbacks. That would be a very interesting game to see.
Barry, does Booker T. Washington get their first win this week?
I think they will. Again, their hopes were high for Booker T coming into the season, especially after the way they dominated in the All-City preview. But we knew going into the season, those first 2 games are going to be rough. Playing Muskogee and Del City, and they've taken their lumps. But I think they will break through against Central. Although Central, it won't be easy. Central is 1-1. They're a pretty solid team, but I think Booker T probably has too much manpower for Central. But it's good to get that series going again. They haven't played in about a decade.
Really? I didn't realize that. Well, Barry, what else is on your mind? Anything else you want to get into, or shall we leave it there for this week?
Just looking back at the past week, the Caleb Barnett situation.
Yeah, I guess tell me if you disagree. Ultimately, the OSSAA got it right. It's a shame that it had to kind of go on as long as it did, but you could argue it was looking like it was going to be even longer. So now that this situation is behind us, what's your take on all that went down?
Yes, I think similar to what you said and what Bill Hastings said in a great column when he wrote a day or 2 before the situation was finally resolved. He said, if this is all it is about, a player on video making a 4-second comment about, hey, we've been wanting Caleb to come over here for years. If that's all there was, which apparently I guess was all there was, then that is really flimsy, real flimsy. And yes, the OSSA ultimately got it right. I was surprised because everything was pointing towards this dragging out a little bit.
Yeah.
So when it came down and resolved so quickly on Friday, after it seemed like, well, this is going to take at least another week, if not 2 or 3 more weeks, and would it ever get resolved without going to court? So it was credit to the OSSA and all parties involved that it did get settled last Friday. And so Caleb Barnett can get back to playing football, and we can get back to seeing him on the field because he's one of the most exciting players there is, one of the fastest players there is in Oklahoma high school football.
Yeah, and when he did get in again, he didn't play a ton last Friday. Pretty sure he didn't play in the first half, but got a couple catches in the second half, and you can tell he's dynamic. And he didn't have any big plays necessarily, but sometimes you just see kids and right? And he looked like one of those kids. So it'll be real fun to watch him the rest of the season, no doubt about it.
It will be, and he's reunited with his quarterback from their Broken Arrow days, Owen Jones, because they were teammates as sophomores at Broken Arrow. So that will it'll be interesting to see if they can pick up where they left off, basically, because it's sort of like discount because of the sort of the chaotic nature of him just being declared eligible right before last week's game. I don't think last week will be indicative of what we will be seeing from the rest of the season when it comes to Caleb Barnett being incorporated and excelling in the Jenks attack.
Barry, what game are you covering this week?
In a rarity, Bill Hastings and I will be at the same game. We'll be at the Backyard Bowl, although that Shiloh-Lincoln game was really tempting. And Bill and I were both not at the Backyard Bowl last year. So again, it's a rarity, at least in the regular season, for us to be at the same game, but that will be the case this Friday night.
All right. Well, we'll look for all your coverage, not only from you and Bill, but from the other writers from the Friday games and the Saturday paper. And very appreciate the knowledge as always. And we'll talk next week.
Sounds good.